This is Ryan Elliott for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. We're down at Dale Youth Boxing Gym today. With me, Francis Warren. Firstly, Francis, before we get going, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, sir. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you for asking. Before we get on to what we just saw at the weekend, you had a couple of shows on. Let's get on to what we're doing today. We've got an event, Royal Albert Hall, next Friday. We had some of the fighters down today, Dale Youth, going through their paces in front of the kids. Talk to me about that, how inspiring that must be for these children to come watch these fighters down here today.
Well, there's young fighters down here today, so probably not so long ago, some of the boxers that were here today were probably in the same position that the kids watching were. So, it can do nothing but inspire them. The idea is to give them some encouragement to get in the gyms and to follow in the footsteps of the likes of Archie and Daniel and hopefully one day, well, if they decide to go down the same route as those guys, to be fighting at venues like the Albert Hall.
Now, Dale Youth's got a very interesting, incredible recent history. It's produced champions of many, but with the Grenfell disaster, among the many tragedies, the gym was also lost. We've now got this beautiful community centre, the Dale Youth Gym's reborn, a wonderful facility. All the kids can come down. I believe I'm right in saying all the profits made from this area go back into the community. How important is it for the kids in this area to not only have a distraction but have some direction possibly as well by being able to come down to the gym?
Well, it just shows you what boxing can do. By it brings people together, and although it's a very individual sport, it's a communal effort and a team effort. You see boxing teams, when they go abroad, for example, how tight they are, how much they rely on each other to keep, to keep each other's morale up, for example, and this is just that on a much larger scale. They had some fantastic contributions and donations to get this gym and community centre up and running. And it's a real privilege and it's a bit of an honour actually to come down here today to see how far it's come from the disaster that occurred at Grenfell. The kids thoroughly enjoyed themselves and really, obviously we're here to promote an event, but I think seeing the enjoyment that the kids had today really took over all of that.
Particular cheers for Frank Bruno and Daniel Dubois when they got in the ring today and went through some pad work together. Daniel returns next Friday against Dubois-Tetteh. Before we get on to that, Boxing Writers Young Boxer of the Year 2019, Daniel Dubois. Well deserved, Francis.
Absolutely. I think it's the first heavyweight winner of that. I think it's 26 years, 23. And you think some of the young, the young heavyweights that have come through since then. So it's a real honour for Daniel. Just thrilled to bits for him, and he thoroughly deserves it. He's had a fantastic start to his career, picked up some belts, and as we see the name of the show next week, every belt, that's what he's after. He wants to pick up as many as he can along the way. We need to buy him a new mantelpiece for Christmas, I think.
As you mentioned, Daniel has firmly sort of stated throughout the duration of his professional career, he wants every belt on the way up. He's a fighter that's certainly gone the traditional route. I think he's gone Southern area, English, British. He's picked up various other trinkets as well, but now the Commonwealth. How important is it for him to take all of those steps and get his learning in for such a young heavyweight?
Well, they are learning fights, but it's quite strange that he's actually picking these belts up as he's learning. He's obviously doing something right in the gym, and I know that that Martin Bowers is extremely pleased with his progress. This isn't just about getting belts. This is calculated. Picking the right opponents for him at the right time. People that might give him a bit of trouble, because there's no point in having people he's going to blast out. He knows what he's doing. Obviously, his training team know what he's doing, and we know what we're doing. So it's going well.
Now, as I mentioned, he faces Ghana's Dubois-Tetteh, a somewhat unknown opponent. I can't say I've seen much footage of him. I think there was a little bit of criticism on the back of the Gorman fight going in with someone like Tetteh. What can you tell us about him? What do you expect him to bring?
He comes in for a go, and you got to remember when you get the guys coming over from Africa to fight, especially when they come over to the Commonwealth title. This is like a world title fight for them. If he can beat Daniel next Friday, it puts him onto a completely different level. It's like different stratosphere to where he is at the moment. So I know he's going to come over and give Daniel a real test. He wants to avenge Richard Lartey's loss, so he's got a little bit of extra motivation. It's not an easy fight. and this guy can punch a bit as well. So I think it'll be an interesting night.
I was going to ask you about the Richard Lartey fight. As you mentioned, African fighters, when they come up at the UK, quite often rather than tucking up, they will just have a go, knowing it's a golden opportunity. We saw the Richard Lartey fight, fantastic fight. I'm sure, like you said, you would have preferred not to see so much trading. Do you think we can expect something similar next Friday?
I think that's what you get. I think that's what you're going to get. I think hopefully Martin gave Daniel a bit of a telling off after that. But, Daniel's got that in his locker. He's very, he's compact. He's got a great jab, great 1-2, but when when someone pisses him off and brings it, then he's got that in his locker to be able to give it back.
Elsewhere on the bill, the sharpshooter Archie Sharp back in action against Declan Garrity. I was speaking to Archie earlier. He was telling me he feels next year he's ready to move up to world level. He wants to challenge for a world title, but he's got a pretty decent test next Friday first. Yeah,
I mean Declan always has a go, always brings it, and I think again it's a learning fight because it's no foregone conclusion at all. But I think Archie is a level above. I think he's a level above quite a few of the guys in Europe actually at the moment. So I'm looking forward to seeing him perform well again next Friday, and we'll go from there. I mean, it's a strange one with Archie because he's still, he's a young man. Always getting better and better. So it's obviously about the time and it's getting the timing right as to when we take that next step up.
Do you believe it could be next year that he's ready to take on someone like Jamal Herring, etc.?
We shall see. We shall see.
All right, coming on to the action we saw last weekend, we'll start with the show you were sort of covering, so to speak, over at your call. Lots of competitive matchups right the way through. Let's start with Sonny Edwards, top of the bill. Really impressive again. I know he busted his hand midway through the fight, but still in full control. How impressed were you with Sonny last weekend? Again,
it's another masterclass from him. I think. Had he not done, bust his hand. I mean, it wasn't bust, but it wasn't. He didn't need to go and go hell for leather to knock the guy out because he won. I think he won every round. So it was punch perfect. Very impressive. He's getting better and better. I'd love to watch him fight every 6 weeks. To be honest, you just sit there and it's magical. I really enjoy watching him fight. And I think I'd like to see him fight Tommy Frank. I'd like Tommy Frank to step up and take that fight because it's a good domestic clash before he kicks on to looking at top 2s and top 3s in the world.
I know Sonny's been out again on social media in the last couple of days saying, any fighters in this country want to fight me? Will someone come and fight me? How hard is it to match Sonny Edwards?
Internationally, it is actually quite tricky. Yeah. It is actually quite tricky. You'll have to grab a matchmaker, Jason McClory, because I think he has sleepless nights because obviously the time zones that he has to go through to try and get Sonny a fight. If there are any domestic challenges, let's go for it because I think that's what to get Sonny out there a little bit more, and people to sort of sit up and take a bit more notice. Then a domestic fight is always one that's a winner on that on that front. But if there isn't, we're not going to hang around for anybody. And there are. Sonny mentioned the RBF champion. I think that would be a good fight for him. I believe second quarter of next year.
Tyson Fury, I'm sure you stayed up to watch the fight. A gritty win against Dubois-Tetteh. It wasn't the fight we quite expected. I think Tyson was forced due to the 2 cuts he sustained to turn it into a bit more of a dog fight. I know Dubois-Tetteh was determined to try and open those cuts up a little bit more as well. Very scrappy affair. What do you make of the fight?
Aesthetically, it was guts and glory. It was a real bit of a throwback fight, wasn't it? Big cut. One guy trying to make the most of the injury, and the other guy, I think, to be honest, I thought Tyson, people saying he was tucking up and trying to avoid him. I didn't see that, to be honest. 7th round, he was really going for him. But he switched on. He switched on enough to be able to recognise that he had to keep Otto away from that cut as much as he could. And in the end, it was good fun to watch. It was a good scrap. And anyone moaning about it, I don't think they're watching the right sport because that was a real tough, nasty boxing match. And I think. Although it might have not been the prettiest to watch, it was certainly entertaining.
As mentioned, I don't think it was the fight many expected. It was a fight to give Tyson that exposure in the US audience, as we saw with the Shorts fight, and obviously he got that huge profile lift with the Wilder fight. That said, do you think because he sustained those cuts and it almost looked like something out of a Rocky movie, and he was forced to trade a bit more rather than the Tyson Fury we normally see? Do you think in a way that I know you wouldn't have wanted him to get cut if possible, but that might have actually done his profile a few favours, the US fans seeing him fight like that as well?
I mean, you've got to look at some of the pictures that appeared the next day of, grimacing with the blood and the, open wound across his, almost half his face. You're absolutely bang on right. It wouldn't have done his profile or his, any harm at all. It would have enhanced it. It would have endeared him to fans all over the world to say, well, this guy's not just about pretty boxing. This guy isn't all just about style. This guy can grind it out and he can dig it out. It's an enhancement of what he did in that 12th round against Wilder. He can, the set of balls on the fella are humongous. So, he's got everything, Tyson. Had he not got cut, he would have danced rings around Otto all night, and would that have done him as much publicly as what happened? Who knows?
Now, before I come on to talk of the Wilder rematch, I just want to touch on Otto-Wallin. People were impressed. I think the thing people were saying is just because you haven't seen a fighter, it doesn't mean he's not any good. Do you think in a way that one loss will have done more for Otto-Wallin's career than his 20 previous professional wins?
Yeah, because there's a fight like that can put you on can launch you. He's got a good promoter in Dubois-Tetteh. He's a lovely guy. And I'm sure they'll make the most of the exposure that he got last weekend. But if you're dancing with someone like Tyson, then you're never going to go away without having enjoyed yourself. It's okay. So, obviously they're fighting, but Otto enjoyed himself fight week. Got to do a post-fight press conference and he spoke very well, and I'm sure Dubois-Tetteh will make the most of it.
A lot of people are actually touting Otto-Wallin as a future opponent for Daniel Dubois. Do you think that's something we could see down the line?
Let's see. Let's get Friday out the way first.
Now, coming on to Wilder Fury 2, I think a lot of what was running through people's heads after they saw the cuts and the fight was over was, is Tyson Fury going to be okay for February? Do you think that rematch will still be okay to go ahead?
Who knows? We've got to see what happens from the information we get back from the cuts and the injuries sustained, and obviously you got Wilder and Ortiz. They've still got a dance. So we'll see what happens there as well.
Now, there's a lot of talk that Tyson was actually scheduled to be out once more before the Wilder rematch. Was that the case? And I'm guessing it won't be happening now.
No. But very unlikely now. No.
Okay, Francis Warren, thank you very much as always for speaking to Boxing Social.
No worries, mate. Cheers.